Good morning, Rebels, and happy Monday, March 1st. As you can see on the board behind me, today we are finally going to begin reading Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. We will also be doing a set of notes in our notebook, so let's jump right in. We have got a lot to cover today. You can see the do now right here. Ask you to simply write down tonight's homework, and the homework tonight is we're going to be reading chapter 1, and we are going to be completing a set of Cornell notes on page 43 in our notebook. So let's scroll down. We'll scroll through our table of contents down here to the bottom, and you can see here are the Unit 3 pages. Today we're going to do page 43, Chapter 1, The Worst Birthday. And we're going to do Cornell notes. This is one of the chapters that I'm going to pick the note-taking strategy. So I'm going to start off by picking the first chapter. You guys will get a chance to pick the note-taking strategy on the second chapter. So I've gone over this plan for reading with you guys. So I will cover it one last time just in case you haven't seen it in the other videos. But basically, here is our plan for reading Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Remember, it has 18 chapters, so our goal is going to be to do 2 chapters a week. We will do 1 chapter on Monday and Tuesday, and 1 chapter on Thursday and Friday. And you guys know that we are going to be putting a big emphasis in the third quarter on writing. And that is why it's super important for any virtual students who might be watching this video right now that you join us for our live stream classes from here on out whenever you can, because it's going to be allowing you to get the kind of feedback and support that you're going to need in order to be successful here in the third unit. We will be alternating our reading and our writing, so you can see on the board behind me. Monday, we're going to read chapter 1, that's today, and tomorrow we're going to write about chapter 1. Wednesday will still be a support day, and then on Thursday, we'll go on and we'll read chapter 2, and we'll do our notes, and then on Friday, we'll write about chapter 2. And that pattern will continue week after week. Our goal is to become better readers and better, more confident writers. And the best way to do that, guys, is to practice. And that's why we're going to dedicate 2 days a week solely to writing about the things that we've read. All right, so these are the things that you will need to complete for each chapter. Today we're going to focus on the first one. You are going to be completing a set of notes as we read today. So, chapter 1 of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Remember from our lessons earlier last week, this is the second book in the series. So Harry's already gone through the hero's journey one time, and he's returned home for the summer vacation to live with the Dursleys. And that's where we're going to find Harry at the beginning of his second hero's journey here that he's going to go on in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Okay, so today we are going to do Cornell notes as we read chapter 1. Cornell notes is one of the note-taking strategies that we put into our notebooks that were an option for us. Let me go ahead and turn to that page in my notebook for you to remind you. Remember, page 42 in our notebook was this page here on note-taking strategies, and you guys are going to have opportunities to pick the different kinds of notes that you want to do for many of the chapters. But today I am going to pick, and I'm going to start us off by doing some Cornell notes with you guys. This is my favorite type of note-taking because it allows you to write questions, it allows you to write important information, and it allows you to summarize the chapter all in one neatly organized set of notes. The questions and the summaries you guys are going to be able to use for things like best question and things like the 45-second summary challenge. So as we read, we're going to be recording important information and questions. So our goal today is to read chapter 1 and to complete our set of notes for chapter 1. Okay, on the board behind me, you see how to set up your Cornell notes. And I'm going to walk you through it using my ladybug so you can really see. But this is how we're going to set up our Cornell notes. Okay, and in your ELA folder, if you take out your ELA packet from your folder, you will see the next sheet in your ELA packet is an actual paper copy of Cornell notes. Let's take those out and take a brief look at them. Even though we're not going to use them because we're going to be putting it right in our notebook, it allows you to see how these Cornell notes are set up. So now I'm going to take my folder, I'm going to set that aside, and here we can see these Cornell notes. Now if you look at them on this paper copy, you can see there's a place for the topic or the objective at the top. There's a place for your name and your class period and the date. We're not even going to worry about that stuff. We're going to start right here at the beginning with this thing called the essential question. Before we ever began reading, I explained to you guys that one of the big goals of reading Harry Potter is to analyze it and to evaluate it and to prove and show how Harry is a hero. We also know, and we have a lot of vocabulary from our understanding of plot, and we know that books begin with the exposition. So when we get to the essential question, I'm going to be giving you that as the teacher, and it's going to be always revolving around something to do with plot or with the hero's journey. Okay, so I'll give you the essential question each time. But then you'll notice on the left-hand side, there is a thin column for questions, and this is where you would write questions. On the right-hand side, this is where you would write your notes, and in the bottom is where you would do a summary. Now, I'm going to show you specifically how to set these up in your notebook and what the expectations are for you. I also, before we do that, want to remind you of just a couple more things here, and we'll get to those. Okay. Here, before we jump into Cornell notes, I want to point out, I've been talking about this thing called best question. And here you can see what I wrote behind me. It says, as we read, you will have the opportunity to write questions in your notes that you would like to discuss. You guys know that teachers are always the ones that we write the discussion questions and we talk about the stuff that the teacher wants to talk about. Well, in 6th grade, you guys are at a point now with your learning where you can begin to take some ownership over it, and you guys have learned questioning strategies, so you know how to ask good questions. And so this is a place where instead of you guys being told what we have to talk about, this is an opportunity for you to write your own questions and you to bring those into class, and those become the questions that we discuss in class. Not the questions that I write, but the questions that you write. So after reading, we will play best question whenever time permits. Some days we won't have enough time to play best question, but we will usually try to do this at the end of Monday, or sometimes we'll do it at the end of Tuesday, depending on what takes us longer to do, either it's the reading or the writing. With this game, each house has to discuss the questions that they wrote down, and they choose one question that they think is going to create the best discussion. Okay, you only get one. So the Ravenclaw house, they get one. The Hufflepuff house gets one. Gryffindor, Slytherin, each house gets one question. And this is kind of per group. So if you're in Mrs. Mullen's group, okay, each house gets one question. Mr. Trumbull's group, each house will get one question. So there will be discussions going on in each classroom. For people who are virtual, again, if you only participate in the video, you won't be able to participate in Best Question. You will have to join virtually in my classroom, and then that's the room that you will be part of to play this game. But they have to pick the best question. And here, I remind you that you should use your notes about the reading strategy of questioning on page 8 or 9 in your notebook. We put these reading strategies down in our notebooks. Now, I'll give you a quick refresher right here. Remember, there are 4 levels of questions, and in class, we focused on learning how to write levels 1 through 3. Now, remember, level 1 question has only one answer, and it can be found directly in the text. All right? Now, this question, it does not prompt a great discussion because there's only one correct answer, and it's right in the book. All right? So, if you are trying to play Best Question, you probably don't want to ask level 1 questions because once they're answered, and we move on to the next person. Level 2 question has an infinite number of answers, and it puts you, the reader, into the book. Remember, it asks you questions like, if you were Harry, or what do you think about this? What would you do? How would you feel? It puts you in the character's shoes. This usually prompts the best kinds of discussions if everyone does their readings. because this type of question asks for your opinion about things that are happening in the book. So you have to first know what's happening in the book. And of course, we know everyone has an opinion. So level 2 questions can really get great discussions going, as long as everyone in the room has read the book. Level 3, again, these questions have an infinite number of answers, and it pulls situations from the book and it asks you to apply them to your own life. Now, this kind of question can often have great discussions, but only if you ask the right questions, because these types of questions get people talking about their own lives. So a lot of times people will try to ask a level 3 question, but it will be something that just doesn't prompt a great discussion, because ultimately the question, people can't apply it to their own lives. Harry is going to have to kill a big giant basilisk in this book, and if I asked a level 3 question, have you ever had to kill a large snake in your life? That question is going to apply to very few people. All right? There's probably very few people who have found themselves in the wilderness with the need to kill a snake like Harry did. But if you framed your question differently, and you framed a level 3 question like this, that says, in this chapter, Harry had to face a great fear. What is a fear that you've had to face in your own life? See, now that question brings this idea that Harry was facing his fear. It was a big snake that he had to defeat. But every single person can identify with being afraid of something. Not everybody can identify with having to attack and kill a snake. So when it comes to level 3 questions, they can be great discussions. But you, the question asker, you've got to ask the right question and understand, will my question apply to a lot of people or very few people? All right, you really have to think about the question that you're asking. And here were my examples. Level 1 question would be something like, who does Harry live with? There's one answer. A level 2 question would be, how would you feel if you were Harry and you had to live with the Dursleys? Explain your thinking using evidence from the text. So again, here I'm putting you in Harry's shoes and I'm asking you, how would you feel? Level 3 question here, I'm taking the situation from the book where it's Harry's birthday here in this first chapter, and the family ignores Harry's birthday. So my question was this: Harry's family ignores his birthday. What do you and your family do to celebrate your birthday? So now I'm asking you, how do you celebrate your birthday? So I'm taking this idea of a birthday celebration that Harry's not getting, and I'm applying this idea of, well, how do we celebrate our birthdays? And now we can really compare and understand Harry's character and how awful it must be to live with a family that completely ignores your birthday when we compare it to the way we celebrate our birthdays, whether it's big or small. Harry lives with a family that completely ignores his birthday. And just some further information that when we play Best Question, your classroom teacher, they act as the judge. Each house, as I said, they pick one representative to read the question that they think is best, and they facilitate the conversation. After all 4 houses have led their discussions and their questions, the teacher will award house points for the question that they think is best. Now, the points are entirely up to the teacher, and they may choose to award more or less points based on the strength of your questions. You know, some days all houses might earn points, while other days only one house earned points. It all depends on you guys and the quality of your efforts and the quality of the questions that you guys bring to class with you. So now, with all of that said, it's time to finally set these notes up and get started on our reading. Alright, so I'm going to turn over to the ladybug here. You guys can see the picture there, but I'm going to do it here on the document camera. Now, I like to use some kind of a pink or red pen. I don't use blue because the lines on my paper are already blue. And so I use a color like red or orange or something. So, and you guys could use a thin-tipped pen like I'm going to use here. Or you could just use a pencil if that's all you have. And I also use a ruler to set these up. All right, but at the top of the page, we are always going to write still the date, the title, and the page number. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. All right, and today, the date is March 1st, as I said. So I would be putting down 3-1. And I'm going to write down the title of our chapter and the chapter number. So I'm going to do it like this, and you're going to do this for every single chapter. Chapter 1, and this chapter is called The Worst Birthday. You can either find that on the actual page in the book where the chapter begins, or this chapter, this book, has a table of contents. So all the chapters are listed right in the table of contents. So chapter 1, and it is called The Worst Birthday. And this is page 43. So there's my date, my title, and my page number. Now, I'm going to skip a couple of lines, probably 2 to 3, and I'm going to draw a line because I need to leave a space at the top for the essential question. So I'm going to skip down 3 lines there, and with my ruler, I'm just going to draw a line across the page. All right, so I've got a line across the page at the top. Okay, then, down at the bottom, I need to leave some room for a summary. And again, I'm going to want to leave 8 to 10 lines or so. So I'm going to, start probably around here, and I'm going to draw my line for my summary right here. All right, so at this point, I've drawn 2 lines going across. And then if I was to cut my paper directly in half, my line would be about there, if I was to put it directly in half. Now, we're going to have more details to go on the right side than we will have questions. And you're going to see that we're all going to need to have 3 to 4 questions. Well, we need like 8 to 10 to 12 bullets. So we don't need as much space on this side. So we just simply bring the line over this way a little bit. So the line is going to be off-center over here. It's almost like we're drawing a big I, but that center line is going to be a little bit pulled to the left. So here's where it would be down the middle. I'm just going to bring it this way a little bit. And there you go. Now, my notebook is entirely set up for my Cornell notes. Now, I'm going to change color so it stands out for you guys. So I'm going to switch to black. So we know that this section right here is for questions. These are the questions that you guys write. These are not the teacher questions. This is where you're going to write your level 1, your level 2, and level 3 questions. So you're going to write questions here. You need to write a minimum, all right, a minimum of 2 to 3 questions. And you are not allowed to say, well, I didn't have any questions. It is your job to write questions. Remember, okay, that you can refer to pages 8 and 9 in your notebook. I'm going to add that here. All right. Your job is not to ask questions about things that you don't understand. It's about you guys asking questions that are going to prompt good discussions. Like I had asked, how would you feel if you were Harry in this situation? All right. So 2 to 3 questions minimum. Minimum. Could you write 4 or 5? Yes, you could. Okay. Now the right-hand side right here, this is for important details. Important events. All right, important details and events. And how many details and events should you have? Minimum 8 to 10. Minimum of 8 to 10. And you're going to use bullets over here on this side. So the very first thing I would do is I would get ready to set up my first bullet. Okay, and I would not put bullets down all along this. I do not know how long my first bullet is going to be. It could be 2 words. It could be 2 lines. I don't know. I'm going to start with 1 bullet right there. All right. Now, the next thing that we have those 2 sections set up is this bottom section. This is where we are going to write our summary. Our summary needs to be 4 to 6 sentences. Again, this is minimum 4 to 6 sentences. So many people, when we've written summaries in the past, write me one sentence. Okay, you guys are going to refer to page, this is page 30 in your notebook. On page 30 in your notebook, we have notes on how to write a summary. State the main idea. Write one sentence for each transitional sentence or idea category. Now, this doesn't apply because we're reading a fictional book, but you are going to write one sentence for each important event or important detail. All right? And so you are going to be writing your own summaries. And this is something that we're going to work on exclusively, especially on Tuesdays and Fridays, about writing summaries. So I anticipate over the course of reading this book, your summaries might start out a little bit weak, and by the end, you should be able to write a really good, really strong summary. All right, so now that we have that, we're basically ready to read, but we're missing one last thing, and that is at the top. We're missing the essential question. And you guys all need to write it down. Essential question. Everything that I'm writing in black needs to be written down. Everything that is on my paper needs to be in your notebook right now as we speak. So we have the essential question. And I've already written it here in my other notebook. So I'm going to open up so I can copy it word for word. So this is where I'm going to reference a plot word. And we know that at the beginning of plot, we have the exposition. All right, and we also know that at the beginning of the hero's journey, our hero should feel out of place with his setting and with the characters around him. And the exposition deals with setting and it deals with character. Our essential question for chapter 1 is simply this. Can you describe the exposition of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets? I apologize if that's a little bit messy, but it says, can you describe the exposition of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets? And all my notes are basically going to be about the exposition, because I'm going to be talking about what is happening in chapter 1, who are the people I'm meeting, what is my basic situation, what is the setting. All right, and guys, this, just as a reference to you, you could refer to page 18 in your notes. Page 18 in your notes, as a reminder to you, is right here. This is page 18. This was all about plot. We have exposition right here, and we know that exposition is the first stage of plot, and it introduces the main characters, the protagonist, so we're going to meet Harry, introduces the settings and the basic situation, so what's going on. Okay, so now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to read aloud chapter 1 to you. You guys can follow along as I read out loud. Not for the first time, an argument had broken out over breakfast at number 4 Privy Drive. Mr. Vernon Dursley had been woken in the early hours of the morning by a loud hooting noise from his nephew Harry's room. "Third time this week!" he roared across the table. "If you can't control that owl, it'll have to go." Harry tried yet again to explain. "She's bored," he said. "She's used to flying around outside. If I could just let her out at night." "Do I look stupid?" snarled Uncle Vernon. a bit of fried egg dangling from his bushy mustache. "I know what'll happen if that owl's let out." He exchanged dark looks with his wife, Petunia. Harry tried to argue back, but his words were drowned by a long, loud belch from the Dursleys' son, Dudley. "I want more bacon!" "There's more in the frying pan, sweetums," said Aunt Petunia, turning misty eyes on her massive son. "We must build you up while we've got the chance." "I don't like the sound of that school food." "Nonsense, Petunia. I never went hungry when I was at Smeltings," said Uncle Vernon heartily. "Dudley gets enough, don't you, son?" Dudley, who was so large his bottom drooped over either side of the kitchen chair, grinned and turned to Harry. "Pass the frying pan." "You've forgotten the magic word," said Harry irritably. The effect of this simple sentence on the rest of the family was incredible. Dudley gasped and fell off his chair with a crash that shook the whole kitchen. Mrs. Dursley gave a small scream and clapped her hands to her mouth. Mr. Dursley jumped to his feet, veins throbbing in his temples. I meant please," said Harry quickly. "I didn't mean—" "What have I told you?" thundered his uncle, spraying spit over the table. "About saying the M-word in our house." "But I—" "How dare you threaten Dudley?" roared Uncle Vernon, pounding the table with his fist. I warned you. I will not tolerate mention of your abnormality under this roof." Harry stared from his purple-faced uncle to his pale aunt, who was trying to heave Dudley to his feet. "All right," said Harry. "All right." Uncle Vernon sat back down, breathing like a winded rhinoceros, and watching Harry closely out of the corners of his small, sharp eyes. Ever since Harry had come home for the summer holidays, Uncle Vernon had been treating him like a bomb that might go off at any moment, because Harry wasn't a normal boy. As a matter of fact, he was as not normal as it is possible to be. Harry Potter was a wizard fresh off of his first year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. And if the Dursleys were unhappy to have him back for the holidays, it was nothing to how Harry felt. He missed Hogwarts so much it was like having a constant stomachache. He missed the castle with its secret passageways and ghosts, his classes, though perhaps not Snape, the potions master, the mail arriving by owl, eating banquets in the Great Hall, sleeping in his four-poster bed in the Tower dormitory, visiting the gamekeeper Hagrid in his cabin next to the Forbidden Forest in the grounds, and especially Quidditch, the most popular sport in the wizarding world. 6 feet tall goalposts, 4 flying balls, and 14 players on broomsticks. This would be a good spot to stop and write down a note, something that is happening, or you could write down something about the setting, or you could write down a question. I'd like to share as we read through this first chapter the kinds of notes that I am taking with you, knowing that in later chapters I will be relying on you guys to be working on all of your notes independently without this level of support. So you can see right here, the first 3 things are pertaining to everything we've read so far. I wrote down that Harry is a wizard at Hogwarts. That's something about our main character. This is an important detail about him. He lives with his aunt, uncle, and cousin. These are the characters he lives with. And it is summertime after his first year at Hogwarts. This has to do with the setting. Remember, it's not important that this is happening in the morning. When is this? It's in the summertime. And again, think about our hero's journey, our cycle. And we had mentioned each year in Harry's life at Hogwarts is kind of like one cycle of the hero's journey. So each cycle begins summertime. Okay, so it's summertime once again after his first year at Hogwarts. Back on page 5. Sorry, back on page 4. All Harry's spellbooks, his wand, robes, cauldron, and top-of-the-line Nimbus 2000 broomstick had been locked in a cupboard under the stairs by Uncle Vernon the instant Harry had come home. What did the Dursleys care if Harry lost his place on the house Quidditch team because he hadn't practiced all summer? What was it to the Dursleys if Harry went back to school without any of his homework done? The Dursleys were what wizards called muggles, not a drop of magical blood in their veins. And as far as they were concerned, having a wizard in the family was a matter of deepest shame. Uncle Vernon had even padlocked Harry's owl, Hedwig, inside her cage to stop her from carrying messages to anyone in the wizarding world. There we have the wizarding world, and now we have the non-magical world where Harry lives with the Dursleys. Harry looked nothing like the rest of the family. Uncle Vernon was large and necklaced with an enormous black mustache. Aunt Petunia was horse-faced and bony. Dudley was blonde, pink, and porky. Harry, on the other hand, was small and skinny, with brilliant green eyes and jet-black hair that was always untidy. He wore round glasses, and on his forehead was a thin, lightning-shaped scar. It was this scar that made Harry so particularly unusual, even for a wizard. This scar was the only hint of Harry's very mysterious past, of the reason he had been left on the Dursleys' doorstep 11 years before. At the age of 1 year old, Harry had somehow survived a curse from the greatest dark sorcerer of all time, Lord Voldemort, whose name most witches and wizards still feared to speak. Harry's parents had died in Voldemort's attack, but Harry had escaped with his lightning scar, and somehow nobody understood why. Voldemort's powers had been destroyed the instant he had failed to kill Harry. Here we just learned several important things we might want to be able to add to our notes about Harry's parents and what happened to Harry when he was 1 year old. And again, you can see right here, I've got a lot of that information that's coming at us right in these first few pages. We know that his aunt and uncle hate magic. We know that the Dursleys are muggles, meaning they have no magic. And Harry's parents are dead, we know that, and that Harry survived an attack from Lord Voldemort at 1. Right? Again, these are all things, I've got all this down within the first 5 pages. Again, this is all important because it's explaining our basic situations. It's introducing us to who our main character is, and what is the setting so far of our story. Okay? So, Harry had been brought up by his dead mother's sister and her husband. He had spent 10 years with the Dursleys, never understanding why he kept making odd things happen without meaning to. Believing the Dursleys' story that he had got his scar in the car crash that had killed his parents. And then, exactly a year ago, Hogwarts had written to Harry and the whole story had come out. Harry had taken up his place at wizard school, where he and his scar were famous. But now the school year was over and he was back with the Dursleys for the summer. Back to being treated like a dog that had rolled in something smelly. The Dursleys hadn't even remembered that today happened to be Harry's 12th birthday. Of course his hopes hadn't been high. They'd never given him a real present, let alone a cake. But to ignore it completely? At that moment, Uncle Vernon cleared his throat importantly and said, "Now, as we all know, today is a very important day." Harry looked up, hardly daring to believe it. "This could well be the day I make the biggest deal of my career," said Uncle Vernon. Harry went back to his toast. Of course, he thought bitterly, Uncle Vernon was talking about the stupid dinner party. He'd been talking of nothing else for 2 weeks. Some rich builder and his wife were coming to dinner, and Uncle Vernon was hoping to get a huge order from him. Uncle Vernon's company made drills. "I think we should run through the schedule one more time," said Uncle Vernon. "We should all be in position at 8 o'clock, Petunia. You will be..." "In the lounge," said Aunt Petunia promptly, "waiting to welcome them graciously to our home." Good. And Dudley? I'll be waiting to open the door. Dudley put on a foul, simpering smile. May I take your coats, Mr. and Mrs. Mason? They'll love him, cried Aunt Petunia rapturously. Excellent, Dudley, said Uncle Vernon. Then he rounded on Harry. And you? I'll be in my bedroom, making no noise and pretending I'm not there, said Harry tonelessly. Exactly, said Uncle Vernon nastily. I will lead them into the lounge, introduce you, Petunia, and pour them drinks. At 8:15, I'll announce dinner, said Petunia. And Dudley, you'll say, May I take you through to the dining room, Mrs. Mason? Said Dudley, offering his fat arm to an invisible woman. My perfect little gentleman, sniffed Aunt Petunia. And you? Said Uncle Vernon viciously to Harry. I'll be in my room, making no noise and pretending I'm not there, said Harry dully. Precisely. Now, we should aim to get in a few good compliments at dinner, Petunia. Any ideas? Vernon tells me you're a wonderful golfer. Mr. Mason, do tell me where you bought your dress, Mrs. Mason. Ha ha, perfect. Dudley? How about, we had to write an essay at our school, Mr. Mason, and I wrote about you. This was too much for both Aunt Petunia and Harry. Aunt Petunia burst into tears and hugged her son while Harry ducked under the table so they wouldn't see him laughing. And you, boy? Harry fought to keep his face straight as he emerged. I'll be in my room, making no noise and pretending I'm not there, he said. Too right you will, said Uncle Vernon forcefully. The Masons don't know anything about you, and it's going to stay that way. When dinner is over, you take Mrs. Mason back to the lounge for coffee, Petunia, and I'll bring the subject around to drills. With any luck, I'll have the deal signed and sealed before the news at 10. We'll be shopping for a vacation home in Majorca this time tomorrow. Harry couldn't feel too excited about this. He didn't think the Dursleys would like him any better in Majorca than they did on Privy Drive. Right. I'm off into town to pick up the dinner jackets for Dudley and me. And you? He snarled at Harry. You stay out of your aunt's way while she's cleaning. Harry left through the back door. It was a brilliant sunny day. He crossed the lawn, slumped down on the garden bench, and sang under his breath. Happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me. No cards, no presents, and he would be spending the evening pretending not to exist. He gazed miserably into the hedge. He had never felt so lonely. More than anything else at Hogwarts, more even than playing Quidditch, Harry missed his best friends Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger. They, however, didn't seem to be missing him at all. Neither of them had written to him all summer, even though Ron had said he was going to ask Harry to come and stay. Countless times Harry had been on the point of unlocking Hedwig's cage by magic and sending her to Ron and Hermione with a letter. But it wasn't worth the risk. Underage wizards weren't allowed to use magic outside of school. Harry hadn't told the Dursleys this. He knew it was only their terror that he might turn them all into dung beetles that stopped them from locking him into the cupboard under the stairs with his wand and broomstick. For the first couple of weeks back, Harry had enjoyed muttering nonsense words under his breath and watching Dudley tearing out of the room as fast as his fat legs would carry him. But the long silence from Ron and Hermione had made Harry feel so cut off from the magical world that even taunting Dudley had lost its appeal, and now Ron and Hermione had forgotten his birthday. So we see here, Harry is in a really dark place. He doesn't want to be living with the Dursleys. We might ask ourselves, how do the Dursleys feel about Harry? How do they feel about magic? And we see that more than anything, Harry is missing Hogwarts. And so, here's a couple of the things that I wrote down in my notes. I wrote down that it is Harry's 12th birthday. And I wrote down that the Dursleys have a party, but it's not for Harry. HP, and that was my abbreviation for Harry Potter, just because I knew that this bullet was longer. He has to be in his room pretending he doesn't exist on his birthday. And at this point, it might be as good a time as any to show you a couple of the questions that I've already written as I've been reading through this chapter. I did write a level 1 just to show you as an example, and a level 1 might be something like, who does Harry live with? To answer that, he lives with the Dursleys. But then I also wrote down a level 2 and a level 3. And a level 2, it's applicable to what we've already read. How would you feel if you were Harry and you had to live with the Dursleys? We've only met them a little bit so far, but it's as good a time as any to just ask, okay, you understand Harry, who he is, a wizard, he's living with the Dursleys. We might be able to have a conversation about how would you feel about living with the Dursleys. And, you could explain your thinking using evidence from the story to explain why you would like or you would not like to live with them. Okay, let's keep on reading here to the end of the chapter. We're at the bottom of page 9. What wouldn't he give now for a message from Hogwarts, from any witch or wizard? He'd almost be glad of a sight of his arch enemy, Draco Malfoy, just to be sure it hadn't been all a dream. Not that his whole year at Hogwarts had been fun. At the very end of last term, Harry had come face to face with none other than Lord Voldemort himself. Voldemort might be a ruin of his former self, but he was still terrifying, still cunning, still determined to regain power. Harry had slipped through Voldemort's clutches for a second time, but it had been a narrow escape, and even now, weeks later, Harry kept waking in the night, drenched in cold sweat, wondering where Voldemort was now, remembering his livid face, his wide, mad eyes. One of the things that we see J.K. Rowling, who she is the author of the story, what we see her doing here in Chapter 1, as well as she's kind of providing a bit of a summary of everything that happened in in the first book that we would need to know to understand Harry's story going forward. We understand, and here Harry is revealing a lot of what happened in the first year. So this is one of the cool tricks that authors will do when they are writing sequels to books, and they know that not everybody might have read the first story. This might be the first story that people are reading, and by providing a bit of a summary of the events of the first book right here, it allows the reader to enjoy this book because they're getting all the knowledge that they need to from book 1 right here in the first chapter. I'm right in the middle of page 10. Harry suddenly sat bolt upright on the garden bench. He had been staring absent-mindedly into the hedge, and the hedge was staring back. 2 enormous green eyes had appeared among the leaves. Harry jumped to his feet just as a jeering voice floated across the lawn. "I know what day it is," sang Dudley, waddling toward him. The huge eyes blinked and vanished. "What?" said Harry, not taking his eyes off the spot where they had been. "I know what day it is," Dudley repeated, coming right up to him. "Well done," said Harry. "So, you've finally learned the days of the week." "Today's your birthday," sneered Dudley. "How come you haven't got any cards? Haven't you even got friends at that freak place?" "Better not let your mum hear you talking about my school," said Harry coolly. Dudley hitched up his trousers, which were slipping down his fat bottom. "Why are you staring at the hedge?" he said suspiciously. "I'm trying to decide what would be the best spell to set it on fire," said Harry. Dudley stumbled backward at once, and the look of panic on his fat face. "You can't! Dad told you you're not to do magic. He said he'll chuck you out of the house. And you haven't got anywhere else to go. You haven't got any friends to take you." "Jiggery-pokery," said Harry in a fierce voice. "Hocus-pocus, squiggly-wiggly." "Mom!" howled Dudley, tripping over his feet as he dashed back towards the house. "Mom, he's doing you-know-what!" Harry paid dearly for his moment of fun, as neither Dudley nor the hedge was in any way hurt. Aunt Petunia knew he hadn't really done magic, but he still had to duck as she aimed a heavy blow at his head with the soapy frying pan. Then she gave him work to do, with the promise he wouldn't eat again until he'd finished. While Dudley lolled around, watching and eating ice cream, Harry cleaned the windows, washed the car, mowed the lawn, trimmed the flower beds, pruned and watered the roses, and repainted the garden bench. The sun blazed overhead, burning the back of his neck. Harry knew he shouldn't have risen to Dudley's bait, but Dudley had said the very thing that Harry had been thinking himself. Maybe he didn't have any friends at Hogwarts. Wish they could see famous Harry Potter now, he thought savagely, as he spread manure on the flower beds, his back aching, sweat running down his face. It was 7:30 in the evening when, at last exhausted, he heard Aunt Petunia calling him. "Get in here and walk on the newspaper." Now you have to remember that Harry's just coming off of his first year at Hogwarts, where again, he basically saves the school. He saves the world once again from Voldemort. So Harry goes from being this hero in the wizarding world to coming back to basically being a zero in the human world, in the muggle world, living with his aunt and uncle who treat him like an animal, who punish him with chores, who hate magic, who basically, in my opinion, probably hate Harry because Harry can do magic. They certainly treat him extremely poorly compared to their actual son of Dudley. So one of the great questions we could ask, and again I asked it kind of in here, how would you feel if you were Harry? You go from being this amazing hero who saves the wizarding world in book 1 to now having to live with the Dursleys. How would you feel if you were Harry? Okay, finishing up chapter 1 here. Harry moved gladly into the shade of the gleaming kitchen. On top of the fridge stood tonight's pudding, a huge mound of whipped cream and sugared violets. A loin of roast pork was sizzling in the oven. Doesn't that sound good? "Eat quickly, the Masons will be here soon," snapped Aunt Petunia, pointing to 2 slices of bread and a lump of cheese on the kitchen table. She was already wearing a salmon pink cocktail dress. So while the rest of the family is being prepared to feast on roast pork and these huge sugared pudding with whipped cream, Harry's eating bread and cheese. In his room, on his birthday, all alone. Harry washed his hands and he bolted down his pitiful supper. The moment he had finished, Aunt Petunia whisked away his plate. "Upstairs, hurry!" As he passed the door to the living room, Harry caught a glimpse of Uncle Vernon and Dudley in bow ties and dinner jackets. He had only just reached the upstairs landing when the doorbell rang, and Uncle Vernon's furious face appeared at the foot of the stairs. "Remember, boy, one sound!" Harry crossed to his bedroom on tiptoe, slipped inside, closed the door, and turned to collapse on his bed. The trouble was, there was already someone sitting on it. That's the end of chapter 1. Okay, so at this point, I wrap up my important details here. I wrote down chores, one word, chores, because Harry gets punished with a lot of chores. And at the end, someone is in Harry's room. So these are all of the important details I wrote down from chapter 1. I've got lots of information about the setting, the characters, and the basic situations that are happening. I've also included my questions over here. I added another level 2. One of them is, why do you think the Dursleys treat Harry so poorly? As a question that we can talk about. And level 3, in this chapter, Harry is celebrating his birthday, so we could talk about how do you celebrate your birthday? The last thing that I need to do in my notes is write a brief summary. Now, we will be doing summarizing, and we're going to be writing full summaries on Tuesdays and Fridays. And you can see here, here's my notes, and right here is actually my summary, which is going to be page 44. But each person is going to try to write their own independent summary before we do it as a group. And so you can see right here, here's my summary. And I think about the chapter, I think about the things I wrote down, and I'm trying to focus on the details here. It's tomorrow where I'll really make sure I get a main idea, the details, and a reflective statement. Today I'm just trying to focus on what were the details I would include in a summary. So this is what I wrote for my summary. It's summertime after Harry's first year at Hogwarts, and he is living with his Aunt Petunia, Uncle Vernon, and Cousin Dudley, because his parents are dead. I cover so much in that opening sentence. I get the setting, that it's summertime, and it's after the first year at Hogwarts. I also get the setting with where he's living with. He's living with his Aunt Petunia, Uncle Vernon, and Cousin Dudley. And I also tell you a little bit about his basic situation and explain to you his parents are dead. All in that one sentence. It's Harry's 12th birthday, and the Dursleys have a dinner party. But they make Harry spend it alone in his bedroom. When Harry goes into his room, someone is there on the bed. Okay? Notice, I am not focusing on trying to fit every detail into my summary. I'm focusing on just the most important stuff. One of the reasons I include this thing here at the end, Harry goes into his room and someone is there on his bed, is because that drives our story forward. What's going to happen in the next chapter? Harry's going to have to deal with whoever this is on his bed. Harry knows he's got to be in his room, silent, not making any noise, and now Harry has to deal with someone on his bed. So that's the main reason why that's there. It's only one line in the entire novel, and it ends up making it into the summary because it's going to push our story forward into the next chapter. So when I'm done, okay, you guys will need to upload a picture of your notes. You're going to notice the ELA lessons are going to get longer because we're going to spend one full day on reading and then one full day on writing. So we're kind of doing a double block. That's why today's video is so much longer than the others. But I can tell you that if we're going to be doing all of the readings, our videos will be getting longer. But I encourage you guys to please join those live stream lessons because you'll be able to hear the reading live. You'll be able to participate in discussions, which we can't really do right here. I can't engage you in a conversation about my questions, and you can't ask me your questions either here. The only way we can do that is by being together on the live stream or in person. So your only homework, make sure that you get your notes done. If you haven't finished it, you guys will probably want to write your own summary. If you wanted to copy mine down for this first chapter, you can as a model. But going forward from here, you got to make sure that your work is your own work. Today I'm really modeling for you guys how to do Cornell notes. Alright, so tomorrow we'll focus on the writing. We will be answering questions about what we read today, and we will also be working with groups of our peers to write the best summaries that we can. So until then, guys, have a great night. Bye-bye.